Welcome to She Sells Radio. Whether you are an entrepreneur, a sales professional, or in sales leadership, today's episode is going to be jam-packed with useful information for you to grow your sales. And I want you to just stop and think about it for a moment. So, regardless of which of the roles that I just listed you're in, most likely the most important thing for you to be doing every day to grow your business or to grow your income is to sell, right? But how much of your time every single day is spent actually selling and engaging in meaningful client conversations versus all that minutia that we can get caught up in every day, like going down Instagram rabbit holes or LinkedIn research rabbit holes. I know you do it, so do I. And so our guest today is here to help you increase your sales productivity. And I am so excited for us to learn from him. So Jamie Shanks is the CEO of Pipeline Signals. Pipeline Signals is a pioneer in relationship signal intelligence monitoring, where they monitor and mine accounts for relationship connections, competitive intelligence, and compelling events like job changes. Now, you very likely know Jamie's name from his other company. For 10 years prior, Jamie has run Sales for Life, which is the world's largest social selling training program for mid-market and enterprise companies. And Sales for Life has trained over 250,000 sales and marketing professionals in dozens of industries. Jamie's workshops have been delivered across 6 continents for brands like Microsoft, Thomson Reuters, Oracle, American Airlines, and Intel. Jamie, welcome to She Sells Radio. We are so excited to have you here on the show today.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Absolutely. So here's what I think would be amazing to start off. Give us some of your backstory. And I know that Pipeline Signals is your second company. So give us some of your backstory and tell us about what inspired you to create this new business.
Sure. And it depends how far back you want me to go into the time travel machine.
As far back as you want.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, I was fortunate enough to invent a type of selling. In our world, it's called sales methodology. And what had happened was I was a failing consultant, and through happenstance, luck, and needing to experiment, I invented something called social selling. And it started with a premise, and that premise was when I won a customer, I would reverse engineer that customer by putting their name in the center of a sheet of paper and circling it like a spider web. And I would stare at it and ask myself, who cares about this story? And then it was drawing these spider webs that I came to recognize that people are interested in stories that are within 1 degree of separation of themselves. So imagine if somebody left a customer and went into a prospect. Well, if I talk to that prospect account about our customer, there's an interrelationship there because they used to work there. That's the premise. So for 10 years, built a global sales training company, scaled it around the world, but it started as a murmur, and then over time, the noise got louder where sellers would say, let me get this straight. You're showing me how to mine intelligence out of things like LinkedIn, to watch for account-based, it's essentially account-based marketing, account-based sales development, to watch my accounts and look for opportunities and threats. Why don't you just do this for me? Now, when you sell a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I would just say, no, I need to enable you. I need to enable you. So I'm fast forwarding a lot of stories, but the support tickets kind of grew and grew and grew, where companies would say, could you do this as a managed service? And then finally, when COVID hit, I was speaking at about 30 to 40 sales kickoffs a year. I'd be live at conferences, and I was on about 80 flights a year for 5 years in a row. So that's like 50% of my life was on the road.
Yeah.
COVID hit, brought me back to Toronto, and all of a sudden I had a lot more time on my hands than I ever had before. And I turned to my business partner, Amar, and I said, listen, I've got this idea. It's been sitting with me for years. And it's essentially like a sister company to Sales for Life. Sales for Life's teaching you how to. What if we built a business to do for you? And that's where the premise came from. And we started as an alpha test in 2020. By 2021, we decided to incorporate the business, and we took these alpha and beta test customers and brought them in. Our first, ancillary amounts of revenue started in the fall of last year, and now we're scaling like a hockey stick because it kind of turns out there's a lot more people that want you to do it for them than to teach them how to do it.
Mm, for sure, for sure. I love the stories of new ideas that came out of COVID, right? Because we all had to kind of sit and reevaluate things and look at what can we make better and what can we do differently. So that's so cool. I'm curious. So with pipeline signals, I know so much of the context is about finding these relationship signals and then how do we leverage them to grow our sales. So if somebody's listening and this is really the first time they've even thought about that, what is a relationship signal? Give us a high level overview of what that looks like, and then we'll talk about how to start actually incorporating them into our sales.
I'm a visual person, so
I love it.
I'm about to take a sip of
Yep.
a sip of water. This
Yep.
is a Yeti, and
Okay.
let's assume that Yeti is your hard-earned customer out of Austin, Texas. Now,
Mm,
if you think about who you should sell to next, one of the biggest mistakes that sellers make is they'll lick their fingers, put it up in the air, and stick it in the wind, and just say, "Let me call, all kinds of consumer packaged goods companies or manufacturers." There's not really a rhyme or reason. So that's not objective account-based selling.
mm,
What I want you to first now think about is the compelling reasons why you select an account and why today, not tomorrow. That time management is the single biggest determining factor to making sales quota and not making sales quota. It's the time that sellers spend on account selection and account prioritization that either kills them or makes them money.
mhm.
Imagine you sold into marketing and the CMO of Yeti ups and leaves and goes to Igloo Coolers.
Okay.
Now you have two choices. Choice number one, continue calling that giant spreadsheet of a list you have, hoping and praying that somebody will answer your emails or calls. Or you have a very contextual, let's say, tweet or LinkedIn message or text message to that CMO that says, "Congrats, you're over at Igloo. Well, you know what it's like to work at a cooler company, and you have what are your marketing initiatives that you're going to kick off when you get settled?" In the first 100 days, when a person takes a new job, an executive takes a new job, they will either have physically or mentally deployed up to 70% of their remitted budget for the year. Because
Mm,
after they walk around the office and they figure out where the washrooms are, they start to formulate a game plan. And typically they're given about 1 quarter to really start making an impact. And so they bring in the people, the process, and technology that's made them successful in the past. That's you. And so that's the premise, is that selling um, back into previous relationships is touted to be anywhere from 4 to 6 times cheaper and easier than it is to randomly call other companies. Now
mm,
we monitor many different types of signals, but that's the premise, is that these needles in a haystack, unfortunately an individual seller to try to find that, it's unbelievably time consuming, and you're paying your sellers to do value creation, not to be data miners.
mm.
We're buying back your seller's time. So
Yeah.
that's the easiest way to kind of put it all together for you, I hope.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And one of the things that I'm taking from what you said, Jamie, is the intentionality, which is something that we teach in the She Sells community, which is it's not, to me, the spray and pray approach has never resonated with me back in the day when I was a seller in corporate and now as the CEO of my own company. And what I'm hearing from you is that level of intentionality with what you're doing. I'm curious, I want to take this message and I want to customize it just a bit. So let's say that you're an entrepreneur, because we have so many different types of people listening. Let's say that you're an entrepreneur and maybe you're earlier in starting and growing your own company, and maybe it's you who's wearing all the hats right now. You're selling, you're delivering, right? Like I've been there, you've maybe been there at one point.
I'm still there.
You're
Yeah.
so okay, so you get this. So when it's in that role, how do we, I'm just curious, is there anything else that you would say that's specific to an entrepreneur who is maybe wearing all the hats, just speaking to that intentionality in the sales process? How can we be more intentional and more effective with what we do?
So, and I'll be effective. First, maybe we'll tackle the question on the sales front. And then, of course,
Great.
there's many things you can do as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But if you're as an entrepreneur who is, it's called founder-led sales, meaning
Mm,
with Sales for Life, I scaled that company where others were selling on my behalf.
Yeah.
But with Pipeline Signals, it's a brand new incubated company. I'm the founder and I'm the seller.
Mm.
But founder-led sales, obviously one of the options is every time you win a customer, so I'm a visual person,
Yeah.
every time you win a customer, what I'd like you to do is to take a sheet of paper, and I would like you to draw literally the name, and I teach this in trainings, draw the name of your customer, put them in the center of a sheet of paper, and stare at it and ask yourself, who is going to care about that story? And those are going to be people that used to work there, their vendors or partners, their competitors, or if you look at the LinkedIn profiles of the people that you serve within Yeti, they have connections to other like-minded businesses. Now, you may be so new that you have no customer base. Now let's assume you actually knew who your ideal customer would be.
Mm.
Now, what I want you to think about is the fact that there are three major events or three kind of types of sales intelligence that give somebody a reason to want to even talk to you. And the best way to think about these are they're like puzzle pieces, three different little puzzle pieces. Puzzle piece number one is buying intent. And if you happen to use a tool that when you send a video to somebody, you can track if they opened it.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can buy buying intent software that tracks when somebody Googles a keyword or downloads an ebook off of your website. Having that intelligence helps you segment, should I focus on the account that actually downloaded the ebook from my website today, or continue calling into some random companies? I think the answer to that. So category one is buying intent. Category number two is called product usage. And if you had more customers, it's also known as workload consumption. What product usage means is if I sold cloud a cloud tool, I would want to focus in on any company that uses AWS or Microsoft Azure because they would need more cloud storage. So there's technology that can tell you what technology other companies use that is a complement to what you sell. That's the idea of product usage.
Sure.
The third comes in this form of relationships. But since you don't have a relationship, there are forms of what's called pending relationships. So as an example, wouldn't you want to know every executive that just took a new job in your town, or that every new finance leader that just took a job in a certain vertical or industry in the last week, because that meets your ideal customer profile. While you don't know them, they're new, they're more malleable to change, and they're going to be interested to make an impact. So if you can get there, like the movie Inception, if you can plant a seed in their mind early, you can get there before your competition. So I know that was long-winded, but the purpose is, if you're a founder, those are three major data points that help you focus your time and energy. Otherwise, you are completely spraying and playing.
Yeah. Yeah. Gosh. No, that I love the context of that. And one of the things I'd love to hear your thoughts on, because you're brilliant at messaging. I've seen the messaging you put out and how you help coach salespeople on messaging. So let's say it's bucket three, like you were talking about, and we're looking to build new relationships. What are some of the best things we can say to break the ice, right? There's somebody new, there's a new prospect or someone new in town who we want to build a relationship with. What are, I know you get as turned off by the cheesy opening lines as I do, right? But what are some of the things that you coach sales professionals or founders to say when they're looking to break the ice with a new prospect and build that relationship?
So I'll start something very tactical for you,
Okay.
and then we'll kind of go to strategic, because I'm sure your
Right.
listeners want something like they can chew on.
Yeah.
So imagine I want to prospect you. I want to communicate with you. The very first thing I do, and it's amazing how few people do it, I not only Google you, but I click on Google images and because I don't want just like the written pages on Google of things that maybe you contributed to articles. Go to Google Images, because what Google Images will do is it picks up all your social media profiles and platforms, and it aggregates all the important photos you've been tagged in. So you're calling from an RV. So imagine and this, one of the coolest like sellers, some of the coolest moments I can remember sellers pitching me. If you went to my Instagram, you'll recognize that I love skiing and I love boating.
Mm,
My son's a competitive water skier. My daughter wake surfs. And so I've had prospects send me a photo of their boat or their kids behind their boat. Like, oh, yeah,
mm,
by the way, they break the ice through what's called uh, the sphere of influence. It's like
mm.
we're bringing our two worlds together. Oh, by the way, my kids wake surf too, and we wakeboard behind this boat. By the way, I also notice you're in the sales world, and this is what we do to serve that sales world. So they bring personal into the business.
I
So
love that.
tactically, Google Image or Google Video will bring forward the fact that you're in an RV, you've got children, you're traveling around the world. You can bring forward some of those commonalities.
That's great.
Easy
Yeah.
way to also think about it for anyone who's ever backpacked around the world. If you've done it for long enough, you've been in Europe on week 6 and you're in Europe in week 9, you start to notice you migrate into expat bars because
Mm,
you kind of miss your brethren, you kind of miss your kind. This is why this works very well. So that's the tactical. On the
amazing.
strategic side, I'm a huge believer of the law of reciprocity. So
Mm,
if I'm trying to book a meeting with you, I'm actually not trying to sell you my widgets or boobobs. I am trying to exchange my knowledge for your time. What you can give me is 30 minutes. What I can give you is knowledge you do not have. The only way I can earn that from you is I need to give you something tangible to whet your appetite. And you say, wow, what you just showed me or told me is valuable enough that I am willing to exchange 30 minutes of my time next Thursday to learn more. So it's literally the value exchange. So you need to think about how you can, in the law of reciprocity, give something in advance, intellectual property, ideas, best practices up front, enough where you would say, you know what, like, I'm kind of intrigued here. I'm willing to give up my busy schedule next Thursday to book that meeting. And because if you don't do that, why would you give up that 30 minutes? So those are the two things that I would lean in on.
it's so good. To me, the things I love about that are, I mean, again, it's so aligned with what we teach at She Sells, but it's the customization, it's the personalization. It's so simple, the Google images and videos piece that you talked about. I've never heard someone give that tip. So I love that because
Should do it. I'd
it's
be
so
curious.
simple.
I didn't do this before the call. I should Google your name. I'm
And
sure there'll be like photos of you, at the RV, like,
maybe so, right? It's new enough, but over time there will be. And now I'm thinking that, gosh, I'm gonna go do that for you right after the call too. So
you'll see all kinds of boating and ski
I
videos.
love that. I love that so much. Yeah. And then the reciprocity piece, it's generosity, right? It's which is a core value of
No
mine. And that I go
to
ahead.
be asked of. Like nobody imagine we just or we hadn't even met, and
Yeah.
I'm asking you for something right away.
Yeah.
You're like, come on, like who is?
Right.
But if I give you something, then
That's it. Yeah, that's it. One of the concepts that you teach with Sales for Life is this concept of digital sales mastery. And I know this has evolved a lot since you founded Sales for Life and since you really, invented this field of social selling. What are some of the things that, as we record live, we're in, gosh, almost halfway through 2022, which is wild. What are some of the things that you think we need to know today? So the rest of this year, moving forward, that you see making the biggest difference in terms of digital sales?
that's a great question because the natural things that people will focus in on. So if you think of digital sales, there's an inbound motion and an outbound motion.
Mm,
Inbound motion, we actually call that from my first book, Social Selling Mastery, which is how do you become a magnet, a trusted advisor in your community? That does not happen overnight. And that will be a leading indicator to helping your 2023 year,
mm,
but it's not necessarily going to make an impact here. So now we have to lean on the outbound motion. And that outbound motion, the fastest path to opportunity creation is reverse engineering past customers. I'd have to say that if I had 90 days to make an impact and I needed to book 10 meetings, I would be reverse engineering all happy past customers or
Mm,
diving into the social profiles of my existing advocates and reverse engineering them to figure out who they knew that they could broker introductions.
mm,
Outside of that, you're then playing the inbound game, which it's kind of like a flywheel,
yeah.
and the flywheel takes a while to get going.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. And it's all about low-hanging fruit, right? And I kind of specifically work with clients to first get to six figures in income and then to seven and beyond. And to me, you can do all of that and more with just that very low-hanging fruit, but we can overcomplicate it and we can say, I need to launch a podcast first. I need to do this first. I need to do that first. And to me, it's always like, yes. And in the meantime, if you want to make money quickly, focus on the low hanging fruit. So I think that's brilliant to look at who are those top customers, reverse engineering them, and then seeing what connections can they make, who are the similar clients to them that you can serve, et cetera. So
To your
yeah,
listeners,
yeah.
I the interesting thing about for any of your listeners who are multi-founder or have had multiple businesses, and I've had more than two. I think I'm on business like six or seven.
Oh,
The
wow. I
one
did that.
thing is
Great.
it's kind of like half-lifing. You learn from one business, maybe took you 10 years to figure out something in company one, and then company two, you figure it out in five, and the next one like shorter than that.
Yeah.
We decided with Pipeline Signals to build an outbound motion from day one, um, not in sacrifice, but almost more horsepower was put into outbound motion than inbound. So with Sales
Mm,
for Life, we built an incredible inbound machine. We had a sales like we sold to the global enterprise and global mid-market only. And we had one sales qualified lead a day from a Fortune 2000 company. Like it was machinery, but
wow.
it cost $1 million per year to run that marketing machine. So that
Which
was
is helpful for context for people to say, what does it really take? Yeah.
that meant that so we had a blog released every day. We did two podcasts, or back then it was more webinars, so webinars per month. We did a quarterly summit, virtual or live summit.
Mm,
I mean, like it was social media posts endlessly. It was a machine.
yeah.
So, which was good. I mean, you're catching lots of smaller fish. But what happens is you get larger. The fish need to get bigger to
Mm,
sustain that growth. And many times the inbound machine can't keep up, or it's a diminishing rate of return. You end up spending more fuel just to keep the baskets of fish coming in.
got it.
And we neglected building a strong outbound motion
Mm,
point where you almost woke up, or we woke up and you'd almost forgotten the skill.
yeah.
So we decided with Pipeline Signals we would tackle the harder piece, I believe, which is develop the outbound motion now and scale it, and we'll go back and we'll feed the inbound machine, which is very expensive, but we know how to do it.
Mm,
So we did it in reverse.
that's an interesting distinction. And so how has that experience been? This, because I know you said at the beginning, it's been
It's
hockey
very
stick growth.
controlled.
So
So what it is
mm,
you control your destiny better. With
mm,
inbound, I can't control, I can influence leads coming in every day.
yeah.
With outbound, I can better control it. I can pick the accounts I want to go after. I can set goals. Like, so it feels much more in control than inbound only. Now, of course, I'm a huge believer. I've got to have both
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
scale. But I have to pick and choose my projects for now.
For sure. For sure. And I think it's knowing where you are in the life cycle of your business, and it's having context for what's the biggest priority right now. And that's how I've always grown my sales and my companies, is it's always been focused on outbound first and letting the inbound machine kick in. And I think you sharing that number too, of it took $1 million a year to run this machine, it's helpful for context for people to say, what does it really take
Yeah,
if
running inbound is not like give some agency $3,000 a month. Like
yeah.
nowhere.
It's a whole thing. I want to ask you, Jamie, this is so helpful. So thank you. I love this because we're getting a lot of really good tactical things that we can apply regardless of whether we're, a seller or an entrepreneur. I want to ask you one more question before we have you tell everyone where they can connect with you. You wrote a recent post on LinkedIn and you said, it's astonishing the playbooks we see sales leaders run. And I'm going to kind of abbreviate a little bit of this, but you said sales leaders still naturally divert to their old bag of tricks, which is increasing headcount as a means of growth, rather than exploring how to create incremental gains through yield per seller. And then you asked, how can you make your existing sellers even 5% more productive? And I just thought, gosh, like that could be a whole separate conversation, right? But again, regardless of whether we're an entrepreneur, whether we're a seller, those incremental gains and thinking about if I could be just 5% more productive with what I'm doing every day, that adds up. And that's huge. You've shared, I think, a lot in this conversation today that we can go ahead and implement to become more productive. But if there was anything else, like one or two other things that you would say, these things will make you more productive in your sales this year and beyond, anything else we can be doing to increase that?
So if I was a seller, I would become a master. If I look back at what I could teach younger Jamie,
Mm,
I would better understand how to manage my time. I was pretty good at it, but I would become a time batching wizard. You
mm,
learn this as an entrepreneur. So what's called switching cost. So imagine, and us as entrepreneurs, unfortunately have to go through this, where meeting one at 9 o'clock is a finance meeting. Meeting two is with a customer. Meeting three is with a vendor who doesn't have their project done on time. Meeting four, and so what happens is your brain is just like banging off the sides of your ears, trying to keep up with this switch. And every time it's doing so, you lose momentum.
mm,
As a seller, the things that you can control, like really focus in on the fact that you can control only your actions and activities. Everything else are just things you're trying to aim towards, influence. What you can control is the actions and activities that you do every day. And the best are able to, in the hours where they're weakest mentally, so at the end of my day, I'm a very early riser. I get up at 5 a.m. The night before, I've actually pre-planned my engagement strategy, my prospecting for the next morning.
mm,
Next morning, I have my list prepared. I know who I'm going to engage. I just need to go through the motions of engagement. And I get it done. The hard things are the hard things. I do it first.
mm,
Then it sets the course for the rest of my day, knowing that I'm going to get banged around all over the place. At the end of the day, where I'm taxed, again, I'm sitting, my glasses sideways on my head, on my laptop, preparing again for those strong moments.
mm,
Batching these periods of time, ideally 90 minutes to 120 minutes every day, uninterrupted, never to be uninterrupted, never to be moved around in the calendar, you'll create a compounding effect
mm.
where you'll, at first, it will feel horrible, but it will compound and compound until one day you'll wake up and you'll have a mini flywheel of leads that you're working.
Mm.
If you keep that machine going and you don't stop the prospecting to close deals, closing deals is another batching time of the day, you will always have this flywheel going for yourself.
Ah,
I would
yeah.
focus on that.
Gosh, that's good. That's so good. It's the thing that's easiest to say no to. It's the thing that's easiest to
Yeah.
push off. Yeah, but the peace, and to your point before about the outbound being more, you're more in control of your destiny that way. The peace that that brings and the feeling of accomplishment that that'll carry through the day is tremendous. So yeah, that's so good. Jamie, tell everyone where they can go to connect with you, where they can go to find out more about your companies. And then I do have one other final question for you that we'll ask before we hop off.
Pipeline Signals, as it sounds.com. Go to Pipeline Signals. Would love to be able to show you how you can take any account in the world and watch for opportunities and risks. And we port that right into your CRM. Number two, connect with me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only guy named Jamie Shanks that looks like this. And then, yeah, ask away any question.
Amazing, amazing. And then just so final question for you. We've got a really diverse audience that listens to this, which I love and which is so fun. And it is She Sells Radio. So one of the things that I love to do when I have male guests on is impart some wisdom from the women in your life. And so you mentioned your daughter earlier.
Well, what my daughter, what my daughter has taught me. So I have a story about my mom, but as I'm telling the story, I'll think
Yeah,
of my daughter. So
beautiful.
when I was 16, very quick story. My father was an offshore oil rig geologist, so he goes out to offshore Newfoundland near Georgian Banks, and I took his Jeep. And with my rugby team, I rolled his Jeep into a ditch 2 weeks after having my driver's license. I brought it back into the garage. My father calls me on a satellite phone and he says, "Be home 2 Tuesdays from now." And I thought I was just going to get it when I got home.
Yeah.
2 Tuesdays from now, a brown 1978 Chevy half-ton pickup truck was sitting in the driveway. And he handed me the keys and he said, "You're never driving my cars ever again, but welcome to the biggest junk box ever. It's yours." And so my mom immediately turned around and she said, "Well, you also don't have a summer job, so why don't you start cutting lawns for everybody in the neighborhood? You've got this truck." So as I went door to door with flyers and the whole bit, my mom gave me this idea that I'll never forget. She said, "Jamie, when you do a great job in the neighborhood, two people are going to tell me about it. When you do a terrible job in the neighborhood,
Mm.
8 people are going to tell me about it. So," and there was a swear word in here, but don't, yeah, and then don't mess up. And it kind of like, even though it was funny at the time, it reminded me the power of customer success. And I learned, and this is maybe why I've spent my whole life in services, in professional services businesses, is like serving the fellow man or woman.
Yeah.
Is if you focus on the human being and you really empathize with the customer and you realize from cutting their lawn to serving them in sales, like just do a good job and other people will hear about you. But it's so fast you could destroy your business
Oh,
by doing crappy jobs. And that word, now with the internet, it would go everywhere really fast.
yeah. Your mom is a wise lady.
So what my daughter's my my daughter has, I don't know, she's an animal. She's crazy. So she's like, I don't know what she's taught me yet. So,
She's teaching you about having fun, right? Maybe, and living living a good life.
yeah.
Jamie, this was so fun. Thank you. This was a great conversation. I'm excited to go, try out some of the really tactical things that you shared here, and also just keep elevating that mindset as a seller myself and as a founder. And so for everyone listening, go connect with Jamie, check him out on LinkedIn, check out Pipeline Signals, and just all the wonderful services that he's created to help us grow our sales and our revenue. And Jamie, thank you again for being on the show. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks a lot for the invite.
Absolutely. All right, my friend, thank you so much for listening. Please, as always, rate and review She Sells Radio. We are so grateful to have you as a listener, and I will see you next week on our next episode of She Sells Radio. Bye for now.